And we'll wait a few minutes, just another minute to get another couple people in here, I believe. And how tonight will go, this is our welcoming slide. We'll do the welcome and upcoming events. We'll have a section for who's hiring and who's looking. So if you're looking to fill positions or if you're looking for a new opportunity, we will take a few minutes to do some quick, you can chime in either through the chat or on the audio if you like. Cara will try to get to her presentation really fast because I think a lot of people want to learn as much as they can from her this evening. So Cara has decided that she'll pause a few times for input from the audience, but if you can put any questions in the chat, I'll do a moderated Q&A at the end. So if you want to get the question in before you forget about it, write it in the chat. I'll make sure to keep track of them, but there will also be opportunities if you just want to speak your question at the end as well. And then we will have a wrap up 7:50 to 8 o'clock, get everyone else out on the rest of their evening or morning for some of us, I think, depending on where you are in the world. That's so exciting. 68 participants. I think we're at a good spot. I think we're good to start, Kyle?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, thank you. So again, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening. I just reviewed our welcome slide, but the main takeaway is tonight's discussion will be recorded and posted on YouTube and a few other places. So if you have any privacy concerns, please feel free to turn off your camera, change your name, whatever makes you most comfortable with that. This evening, we'll be hearing from Cara Brashears, the UX and UI designer, RX Saving Solutions. She'll be speaking about inclusive UX in an area of anxiety. New Hampshire UXPA is the New Hampshire chapter of the User Experience Professionals Association. Our membership meetings are not restricted just to members. So as you all are tonight, everyone is always welcome to join us from wherever they are. We are also active on Facebook, Twitter, and Slack. Our 2021 board is Christine, Cal, Kyle, and myself. Anyone wants to wave? We have a lot of upcoming events from our partners and interesting things I found on the internet. I'll put the links to these in the chat box. There's Product Camp, which is based in Poland this year, and it looks like a really interesting cross-section of people that they're engaging this year. Savvy UX Summit is looking beyond the product. UXPA Boston, I think we have a lot of Boston members and representatives here today. September 24th, all virtual, nice and safe, and they have some really fantastic presentations and networking opportunities this year. September 28th is World Interaction Design Day. And there's Design Ops Summit 2021 by Rosenfeld Media. The UXDX, which is user design and developer cross-section, shift from projects to product teams. That's October 6th through 8th, all online. Lots of job opportunities this month. These are all based in New Hampshire, but a lot of them I found were open to remote workers as well. So Fidelity has several opportunities coming up, including a creative consultant, which looks like they're trying to fill their pipeline with some consultants coming up for a lot of big projects. Flex is an interesting company that's just down the street from me in Hollis, and they have a user interface co-op, which I wanted to get out to people because it is for people in academic programs right now. Iron Mountain in Concord has a few seniors, but I think the visual interaction designer looked like it might be a mid-level. Oracle has moved a lot of their opportunities to remote eligible, which is pretty exciting. They also have a manager of UX design still open. And then Pearson, I think these were based in Concord, I might have that wrong, has design ops, senior and non-senior strategists. there anyone looking for a job or looking to hire people that would like to chime in now with any links to share or opportunities or portfolios? And I can't see the whole chat, so you might go ahead.
Yeah, we are actually hiring right now as well. So I just put a link in the chat to the product designer job posting with me. So reach out if you have any questions.
Great. And Melissa is seeking, just posted a link to their portfolio. Great. Cindy says National Grid is growing their digital team. Okay. And if anyone else thinks of another, Ahmed says senior UX researcher. Has a link, Beam, the company, I think. And Melissa's LinkedIn, good. Amber seeking associate or junior product designer with a LinkedIn. Awesome. Keep those portfolios and links coming in the chat. And if you're looking for the right position or the right person, they might be in that chat for you. Make sure to check it out. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, as always, to our sponsor, Market Street Talent. Market Street Talent is a New Hampshire-based company that is always happy to help your company find the right person for a position or the right position for you. Jay Robichaud is our usual contact with Market Street. I'm not sure if Jay is on this evening, or he might be enjoying some of the lovely weather we're having in New Hampshire this evening. Again, thank you to Market Street Talent. Always feel free to reach out to them. They're a huge help. Cara, that brings us to you. Is this a good time for you to take over?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's do it.
Excellent. All right. Thank you, Cara. And again, if you have any questions, please drop them in the chat and we will revisit them after Cara's presentation. She will pause a few times for some audience interaction, but we'll keep any full questions, I think, towards the end. Thanks, everyone.
Awesome. All right, let's flip over screen share here. The little green box did go away for me. Can everyone see screen okay?
Yeah, I can see your screens.
Gotcha. That happens sometimes where that green box doesn't give you the feedback anymore. So thanks for confirming for me. So I'll go ahead and get started. I am super excited to be talking with all of you today. Really, wowed by all of the people who are here. So this is super exciting for me. Definitely a topic near and dear to my heart. So let's go ahead and get started. So just a little bit about me. So my name is Cara Brashears, as Julia mentioned, and I'm a UX UI designer at RX Saving Solutions. So I'm in Kansas City. Sounds like a lot of you are all over the place. Kansas City has been super hot and humid lately, so hopefully that breaks. But hopefully you all are enjoying nice weather wherever you are. I do have a psychology background, so I went to school for psychology, and I thought that I wanted to do research specifically in cognitive psychology. Quickly realized that I didn't really want to be in a research lab 24/7, so I found the wonderful world of human factor psychology and UX and found my home here. Also very interested in the healthcare space, so RX Saving Solutions, more specifically in pharmacy. So we're a software company focused on pharmacy transparency. So, other than just good RX coupons or anything else, or, switching to generic, there are tons of ways where you can save money on prescriptions. So we're really focused on bringing all of that information to our members and also to our client and health advisors. Lots of topics there, but that is a little bit about me. So what we'll be talking about today, I've got 4 agenda items. Just gonna kind of introduce the topic, talk a little bit about the relevance and why I think it's an important topic to discuss. Go into a little bit of empathy. So I'll be sharing some personal stories with everyone of just why this is so important to me and kind of some just anecdotes of, how to empathize with this topic a little bit more. We'll go into some applications. So, how we can pull these into different design topics. as well as some examples of good and bad implementations that affect mental health. And then finally discuss everything that we have talked about. Hopefully there will be plenty of time at the end to talk about anything we would like. All right, so to get us started, accessibility is a topic that I'm sure many of us are all very familiar with. This graphic here is from Microsoft's inclusive design toolkit, and I think it's a beautiful example of just how we need to think about accessibility. You know, a lot of times stakeholders are really, you know, if we say, hey, we need to make sure we're considering accessibility, they're thinking, oh yeah, you know, ADA compliance, you know, vision, you know, someone who's blind, someone who's deaf. They're really thinking about those very obvious permanent disabilities. But we also need to make sure that we're thinking about the temporary disabilities, situational factors. So, you know, I think that some of these are really great at, you have a broken arm, you only have one hand now, or you're a new parent, you are a distracted driver, or you're outside. There are a lot of different factors that impact how we interact with products, you know, these things that, you know, invisible disabilities, things that aren't necessarily super obvious, but always things that we need to consider. This is just a really great introduction to accessibility in general. And I think inclusion and inclusive design is a similar but sort of different topic that I think is getting a lot more attention lately as well. So when I think of inclusion, I think beyond just the physical abilities and disability that impact how we interact with products, but going beyond that to things like, how do we design for a diverse audience that might need different things from our product? So things from, you know, socioeconomic background to gender, to race, to religion, different things that we can consider in our design and development process to make sure that, you know, when we are designing, we're not just thinking of your own identities or your team's identities, but we're making sure that we have representation from different identities, and also thinking through, well, how would someone with all these different identities that are different than my own experience this product? So cognitive inclusion, not exactly a well-known term. I kind of just put it as the label here, but I think that one thing that isn't often talked about when it comes to accessibility and inclusion, but is super important and is getting a little bit more traction lately, is thinking about, so how do users interact with our products differently based on the different ways that they can think or react to products, the different emotional and mental states that they have. You know, anything from literacy, maybe they didn't get very far in school, and so they're having trouble reading what you've written to them. You know, ADHD, they get a little more distracted, or, you know, they had a brain injury, or they have memory loss and can't remember what they did yesterday. You know, all of these different things, you know, dyslexia, OCD, these are just all kind of under the general umbrella of, you know, cognitive aspects that impact how, you know, if you receive a text message from a brand, you are trying to use a mobile app, whatever that is, all of these different things really impact how we can experience these products differently. So today, as you could imagine from the title of this talk, we're really going to focus on just a couple of these things. I mean, we could definitely have a whole nother talk about all of these different ways to think about how to design for cognitive inclusion. But today really focused on anxiety and depression. I did bold anxiety because a lot of the stories are really focused on that from my perspective. But I mean, really just thinking about mental health as a whole, making sure that we're designing for those. So why are we focusing on just those two? I think that you all can probably guess, you know, it is really more important than ever to consider this when we are designing. You know, the last year and a half of all of our lives have been totally turned upside down and very difficult for a lot of people. And these statistics really are shocking. I mean, we're seeing staggering, you know, unparalleled rates of mental health issues. You know, just looking at this one in particular of, you know, from January to June 2019, 11% of people said that they had symptoms of anxiety or depression, all the way up to 42% in December of last year. And I couldn't really find it a lot more recent than this. Things were getting a little bit better for a little bit. And then, now with the Delta variant, I think, we're seeing a little bit more shutdowns, more mask mandates, some anxiety and depression is going up a little bit higher as people are trying to stay away from people again. So it's really just amazing how the impact of this, it has just been so widespread. And for certain groups, even more than others, right? So this particular study was interesting because it was looking at adults in the US over 65. And when you're looking at this and the way that they looked at these different demographic aspects, the way that if you live alone, if you're a woman, if you're Hispanic, if you don't make very much money, if you're not in great health, the way that these factors increase the risk of you struggling with anxiety or depression really is, staggering. And I think that even though the study was just for 65 and older, we can imagine that some of these trends might be similar for all age groups. But this is very interesting to me, especially in the pharmacy space, looking at 65 and older, that's a huge percentage of the people that we're designing for. So I'd encourage you to, think about the users for your own products and kind of dig into, hey, what users do I need to be looking at differently? What are some of the emotional states that some of my different user groups might be in? It's just, we've all been struggling. Not all of us have had, symptoms of anxiety or depression, but we've all definitely been having a bad time. But really seeing that when this pandemic puts a toll on people, and even beyond the pandemic, 5 years from now, if we're back to a quote unquote normal state, I think we're still going to see a little bit of the remnants of just the stress that this has on people. So before moving further, I kind of just want to pause a little bit and just see, maybe put in the chat, or you can use one of the reactions on Zoom. But I am curious, how many of you know someone that has been struggling with anxiety or depression? I just kind of want to get a general sense of people who are here for personal reasons or just interested from a professional standpoint. Wow, already lots of people. Okay, great. Wow. Yeah, it looks like some of us are just struggling ourselves. Absolutely. That has the benefit. I think that when we do have friends and family or ourselves, it does help us put ourselves in that mindset of being able to design for that. Absolutely. Those that think they probably don't, yes, I definitely have quite a few different people in my life who I can tell that they're struggling a little bit, but don't explicitly acknowledge it. Absolutely. Wow, okay. Well, thank you for responding to that quick little poll. I'm definitely glad to know that some of you are here, not just for the interest of UX design and product development, but also, for kind of talking with your friends and family and just, talking about this issue as a whole. That's great. So what I'm going to do for this empathy section, so I have 3 different stories for you, and they are all through the perspective of Alex. So her name isn't actually Alex. I'm keeping her identity anonymous, but Alex is someone very, very close to me who has been struggling with anxiety and depression for quite a long time. And the last year and a half of the pandemic have been exponentially difficult for her. And so even before the pandemic, I think that, we would have a few times where we were hanging out together, and, I would kind of help her with a few different things in technology. I'm kind of her technology go-to being in this field. But there have been definitely some times, definitely in the last year, where, I had to start, jotting some of this down and sharing this, because it really breaks my heart, talking to her about some of these things. So the first story, I just want to start with this quote that has really stuck with me. So she called me one day and she needed my help with something. And she said, "I just can't figure out what to do next. I am so stupid. And I was, okay, like what's going on? What are you trying to look at? So she had a doctor's appointment with a brand new doctor the next day. She had been struggling with really bad migraines and she was very fed up with it. She just needed to go to a new doctor to see if they could tell her something new. And she was sent this email that said she had to fill out all of her medical history and upload some forms and make sure that she did that all before her appointment the next day. So she was trying to fill this out. She went through the whole registration process and she didn't know what to do next. And so I went over to her house and tried to help her out. And I was able to see that, the website was broken. So she was trying to upload the form and it wasn't even spinning. It wasn't reacting to when she tried to upload it. And because of that, it wasn't validating that step. So it wouldn't let her move forward at all. And she couldn't tell that it was the website's fault, right? Like she was like, is this like, am I uploading the wrong form? Am I clicking the wrong button? What am I doing wrong? I don't understand what's happening. And I was pretty quickly able to tell her like, oh, it looks like, this is broken. You're just going to need to probably go in early tomorrow and fill out this paperwork in person. And her reaction when I said that, she said, I am sorry that I couldn't figure it out. I can't believe I couldn't figure out that it was broken. So one, her anxiety was already increasing because I had driven over there to help her only to find out that it was broken. Why couldn't I figure that myself? And then she was, continuing to tell herself, well, okay, now what am I going to do? Because now I'm going to have to leave work earlier, even earlier than I already was going. And what are the staff going to think of me when I show up for the first time? I'm a new patient and I didn't follow the rules and I didn't fill it out. Her thought loops were I could tell her body was getting tense. And just because she couldn't fill this form out, she was really, really struggling with this. And I could tell that just for the rest of the night after I left, she was going to be thinking about how she was going to tell her boss that she had to leave earlier, how she was going to explain to the new office why she couldn't figure it out. Just because there wasn't feedback to her of why she couldn't upload the form and why she couldn't move forward, it led to all of this pain for her. Another time, I was already over at her house, we were hanging out, and we had just gotten her some new glasses from Warby Parker, and she needed to fill out a claim on her vision insurance website so she could get the money back, get it reimbursed. So she goes, of course she has to log in to do this. And she's like, I don't even know if I have an account. I cannot believe my memory is so bad. Not that I can't believe every website makes me have an account these days, or I can't believe they make me have a username, not an email. She said, my memory is so bad. And this is something that she really struggles with in general because she thinks that she has a terrible memory. She sometimes is a little bit forgetful, or she doesn't remember some of our conversations. This is something that she's already very self-conscious about, and she feels very horrible about herself for it. And the fact that when she comes to this website and she has no idea if she has an account or not, she's already blaming herself. And we go through this horrible reset password flow. I mean, everything was broken. I was there with her, and so we were able to kind of laugh through it. But I know that if I wouldn't have been there, she would have really been struggling with it. I was like, oh, this is a terrible design, kind of laughing it off. Oh, this is a weird error. This is broken. I don't think that she would have been able to know that those things were broken or bad design. She would have continued to blame herself. It was one of those things where you don't get the reset email, so we send another one. But then when you click the link, turns out that it was the old email, so it's expired. It was just a whole process. And I was there to help her through it, but I just kept thinking about the fact that, like, no, this is not your fault for not knowing your username and password. It's not your fault for not writing it down. She has a little book where she tries to keep track of things because she doesn't want to use it. in a password manager because she doesn't understand how password managers work. So she was blaming herself not only for having a quote unquote bad memory, but also why didn't I write this down when I signed up 2 years ago or however long ago she got the vision insurance account. So this experience, I mean, I'm sure a lot of us work on, just general login, account registration, password reset, all of these very typical flows. There's a lot of bad ones out there. And, we think that it's a very typical process where we just kind of do what's out there without really thinking about this could be a very difficult process for a lot of people without realizing it, and just how it fed her self-doubts about these things that she always tells herself. Just a simple thing, I won't even get into the difficult flow of actually filling out the insurance claim. That was a whole nother beast. But I was just floored with how this, what I usually think of a very simple process could, really knock her off her feet. So this last one, I don't have a quote for, but we were filling out this form for, I think it was a new financial account, new bank account, something along those lines. And there was a question when she was creating her account about her marital status. And she didn't say anything to me, but her whole body just stiffened. She kind of flushed a little bit and she kind of muttered to herself. She was like, why do I need to know that? And her demeanor stayed changed the rest of the form. She was pretty okay before that, but we got to this point and I could just tell that all of a sudden she was triggered and in her head about my marital status makes me a failure. My marital status is bad. It's not bad, but just because this form was requesting it, even though it should have no impact on what she was signing up for, I wasn't about to tell her, well, they probably need it just because they want to capture demographic data for reporting and marketing. Like, no, if you don't need data, don't request it or make it optional. I think with this specific case with Alex, it was a marital status, but I think that this same sentiment can be felt for a lot of people with gender, relationship status, income, employment status, all of these different things where it might just be another, oh, well, marketing wants to capture that, so go ahead and throw it on the form, or, oh, well, we need gender and the database only has female and male, so that's only what we're going to ask. We're not going to change that. All of these different things that we don't necessarily think about the impact that it could have on someone's emotions when they're filling out these very mundane forms, especially things like finance, healthcare, voting, government forms, these forms that everyone hates filling out in general. But some of these questions just make it even worse for people, So just thinking through these things, my heart was broken just seeing her whole body change. And I had just worked on something where, we were dealing with different form questions and trying to figure it out with different stakeholders. So I knew why it probably ended up there. But the designers of this form hadn't really considered, well, what if someone is divorced? What if someone is single? What if someone is widowed? How are we impacting them? Is that worth the, extra data that we get from this field? Things like that. So wanted to kind of open it up again. I know that when I asked you all earlier, it sounds like a lot of you know someone or yourself, friend or family who has anxiety or depression. And I just kind of want to see if anyone is willing to, maybe we can put it in the chat, or if you're willing to, unmute yourself, go ahead and speak up. But any other stories that you all have, maybe we can just get 2 or 3 of, these were just my anecdotes with an experience with someone that I know. But I'm sure there's plenty more out there. So if anyone would like to share, please feel free. Oh, let me open the chat a little bit. So it looks like Julia was saying sometimes the software the office user uses requires the input because another client needed it. So the dentist
Sorry,
needs to ask because they're,
that was a
was that a
little side
response to
bit,
something else?
but it
Oh,
looks like
sure.
Monica might be saying something.
Oh, yeah. Hi. I've dealt with this quite a bit, and I was actually talking about it in class today. I'm a UX instructor, and we were actually talking about user surveys and what kind of demographic information is important to collect from people, because the requirement for their assignment is to collect some kind of demographic information. And the question came up, what should we ask? Like, what's okay to ask? And my philosophy for as long as I've been in UX for 12 years is only to ask what you need to know and think about the end result. What kind of answers are you going to anticipate that people will provide? And what is it going to take for them to provide that answer? Are you going to be provoking someone? Are you going to be triggering them by asking something? And if you are, is it for a good reason? Like, is it a study about their personal relationships and how they've gotten through them? Then maybe you want to know about their marital status. But if you want to know how often they use an application or what they use an application for, you don't necessarily need to know a person's gender identity or their age or their employment status or their educational level, unless it's going to impact how they use it and making it better for them to use or easier for them.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that you are considering that in, sounds like you said you're teaching UX. I think that's great to make sure that we're always considering that. It really boils down to, well, what do we need for, the task to function and for the user to benefit? And what could be extra, what could be removed, what could be reworded. I think that's great.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks for letting me share.
Thank you, Monica.
Of course. Anyone else want to share? I haven't been keeping up with the chat. Sorry.
No worries. Benjamin says, on the spectrum, I get overwhelmed at times by financial websites that are trying to be too space efficient. There's too much going on the screen, too many buttons, options, and I can't deal without a lot of stress and focus. Absolutely agreed, Benjamin. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and that, is sort of going back to, that slide about all the different types of cognitive inclusion, anything with anyone with autism, ADHD, whether, minor, severe, but anything. I mean, even for those of us who are not struggling with that, but just distraction in general, making sure that, if you get to a site and there's all of these ads coming in and there's no visual hierarchy and you don't know where to look, think about, if you don't struggle with that, how overwhelmed you get. And then imagine how much worse that could be, if you were struggling with autism, ADHD, anything of the sort. I mean, I think that thank you so much for sharing. Who was that, Ben? I think that's a very powerful thing to think about. And, also sort of even a whole nother topic of, making sure that we're keeping things simple and not having too many things moving and really like getting straight to the point. Absolutely.
Oh, Dan. Dan says, I lost my 6-month-old daughter last November. And for a while, all my social sponsored posts were baby related items and services, and all of it was extremely triggering. I'm sorry, Dan.
Wow. Yeah, Dan, thank you for opening up about that. That is very difficult. I'm so sorry to hear that. I think that we talk a lot about how personalized ads can already be a little bit anxiety provoking of how do you know that about me? Like, what did I search for that all of a sudden, I'm seeing these different ads. And I think that, your situation is something that a lot of us don't think about, how do you put a stop to that? Or, how would you be able to go into your privacy settings and turn off baby related advertisements, anything with those privacy settings, cookie settings, things like that. They are very inaccessible and very difficult to understand. I would know how to go about, doing that. But for example, if, it's Facebook or Google being able to manage what, targeted ads I see, being able to turn off different topics so that you at least have some control there. Like, wow, I think that's a very important piece to think about, especially when it comes to advertisements and, you know, how algorithms that, you know, personalize things and, you know, we think we customize content, how you can have the flip side of that and have a very negative and triggering experience.
I have a one that was actually on my last day, the day I was presenting a big project at my UX boot camp in Boston. So I had to make it to the bus on time for a 5:30 bus to get into Boston. And I had just switched from Android to Apple to try to join the Apple world where everyone is designing for. And I ran out of gas on the side of the road. And I have anxiety and depression and a sleep disorder that makes me very tired all the time. And trying to navigate the AAA app on the side of a dark road in December with a new operating system, new design layouts that were not what I was expecting at all. And if you look at the AAA app, there is a lot going on. And that is a point that there really shouldn't be, because you're usually on the side of the road and stressed. And you add some blurriness and sleep deprivation to the mix, and that was a disaster. It was
Absolutely. That sounds very rough. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I mean, I think it goes into everything that we're saying about, you know, you've got your situational factors, you know, it's dark, you're on the side of the road, you're stressed because your car broke down, but also your individual factors of struggling with anxiety and depression. You haven't been sleeping, so that, you know, makes your mind foggy and you're not able to think of things correctly. All these different aspects. I mean, you could have any combination of situational factor and individual health, individual, you know, mental capacity. There's so many different things that impact these. And really just thinking through all these different scenarios, you know, how will someone with I don't know if anyone's seen, I think it's Airbnb has these design cards where you can kind of flip them and be like, okay, so how can someone who has poor vision and also, you know, is struggling with the loss of someone, how would they experience this feature? And you kind of, you know, mix and match and try to think of all the different identities that people could be having at the time of using your feature. Okay, I think we can definitely come back to a lot of the stuff in the chat at the end, but I do want to go ahead and move forward into the second section, which is talking about applications, right? A lot of us are in the design and product development field, I would imagine. If we're not, you know, hopefully you can learn something from this as well. But really just taking a look at, you know, outside of Alex's eyes, you know, what are some of those things that we can do as designers, as developers, in order to make some of these experiences just a little better. And the first one, I'm going to talk about 4 different things. So the first one, fail better. This is something that I am very passionate about, and hopefully my development teams would agree with me and be like, oh, yep, always go to you with error copy, you know, any, you know, weird technical errors that we're seeing. But something that I think is very important is distinguishing between human and technical error. So I got this error on Instagram that I thought was funny because I was logging in, but it said invalid parameters. I know that that's a technical error. It's not actually invalid credentials, but the average user is not going to know that. So I just, you know, it was probably just a coincidence that it was at this time of login. But, you know, things like this where it's just saying error, invalid parameters. Okay, what am I supposed to do with that? I actually Googled this a little bit, and there's a whole blog post and articles about how to get rid of invalid parameters error on TikTok and Instagram. You know, they're like, uninstall your app. You know, people are searching for this instead of just being told what to do from the error. If it is a human error, which is inevitable, make sure that we explain fully. So I actually just got this error from Facebook last week. I screenshotted it. I was like, this is perfect for this talk. But it said, you cannot use this password. Please try another password. Okay, why can't I use this password? I'm pretty sure it was because I had used it previously. But Is it because it doesn't meet the requirements? Did I put a character in that was not valid? You know, it provides some next steps. It says, please try another password, but it doesn't tell me why, you know, I can't use this password. So just make sure that if it is a human error, we're telling them exactly what went wrong. So when it's technical, avoid jargon. So very similar to that Instagram error that's like, wait, is this my fault? Is this not my fault? You know, this was from Pinterest and it was just, oops, 429 response code. This one I think is funny because clearly a copywriter touched it. I don't think an engineer wrote oops, maybe they did, but it's just a funny combination of, you know, that marketing copy of oops, you know, but then it says 429 response code. And most people are not going to know what to do with that. And just always provide next steps. So I didn't have a great screen talk for this one, so I just pulled in something that I'm working on currently. This is probably one of the more wordy errors that I've worked on, which I didn't love at first, but then, you know, if you're thinking of the situation, so you're trying to submit your request to get your prescription delivered to is the scenario here. And for some reason, something is crazy broken, some APIs are down and we aren't able to submit it. So it's a technical error occurred. It's on our end, it's not your internet, it's nothing like that. So go ahead and blame yourself and please try again in a few moments. So just, you know, refresh the page, see if that works. Hopefully that'll do the trick. But if that doesn't and the user keeps seeing this error, like, all right, so go ahead and call us, you know, here's when you can, making sure that, you know, in these scenarios that are edge cases, but the users who reach these edge cases are not going to be very happy. You know, they might be struggling with other things in life, making sure that we're making it as easy as possible to get out of the error. So second thing, copy. I don't know if we have any UX writers here or anyone that, you know, handles some of the microcopy or just UX copy in general for their designs, but it is so important. You know, if you have content writers, I hope that you are best friends with them. You guys should be working together all the time. But, you know, just a very simple example here of microcopy, continue versus review order. You know, a very simple, wait, if I hit continue, is it charging my card? I need to actually check my bank account first. I'm not sure if it's going to be, you know, wait, is it going to place the order? You know, having a review order, place order, you know, instead of submit, can you say what you're doing? Is it, you know, are you submitting the order? Are you submitting payment? Making sure that just those buttons with navigation labels, you know, making sure that we're, you know, clarifying as much as we can. Okay, what's going to happen if I click this button? Right, like you're talking to a fifth grader. Fifth grader is a little arbitrary, just seemed like a nice age to target, but these screenshots on the right. So I got a request from our legal officer saying, hey, we have this HIPAA authorization form we need to place on the website. Can you like recommend where we should put this? And I was just kind of taking a look at it and I was like, I'm not sure I exactly follow what this is saying. You know, I hereby authorize use or disclosure of protected health information following specific person, class of person, facility, the following person. You know, I was getting a little lost when I was reading it. And so I worked with them and we updated it to be a little bit simpler. So, you know, I authorize the following person to use or disclose the following health information. You know, there is some other legal stuff that we couldn't tweak exactly, but I think that just reaching out to him and saying, hey, you know, I know this is a legal form, but, you know, what can we do to make this a little bit easier to understand? If you have to fill out a HIPAA authorization form, you're not really going to have a great time. You have to put in a lot of detail and you have to explain things, you know, so the simpler that we can make this, you know, especially thinking that a lot of times what this form is filled out for is if, you know, you are someone who is taking over medical responsibility for someone. So let's say that your parent is getting very old and you want to take on medical responsibility for them. So you're filled out as like, yes, I can, you know, authorize all of this health information release. You're not in a very good mental state at that point. You know, you're stressed about whoever it is, you know, making sure that they are healthy, that they are safe, and filling out all of the not so fun healthcare paperwork is just a cherry on top to, making that worse. So I encourage you to, even if it is the legal terms and conditions, like those are never fun to read, or even just marketing copy, anything that is a little confusing, a little wordy, make it as simple as possible. You could be blurry-eyed on the side of the road and not thinking straight. And, how can it be as easy to understand as possible? Clarify expectations and outcomes. So these Airbnb examples, so this is great. I thought that this was a very clever way to make sure that the user understood exactly your reservation won't be confirmed until the host accepts your request. Within 24 hours, you won't be charged until then. Awesome. I feel confident that I can hit request to book because I know exactly what's going to happen. I'm not worried about when my card is going to be charged. I'm not worried about, how long is it going to take this person to approve my request because I need to get there, in 3 days, like it's an urgent trip. This makes me feel confident that I can go ahead and submit this, which is a little contrasting to how you actually get there. It says $95 a night, which I understand is the base price. It definitely goes up a little bit with all of the fees. And then they have a button that says reserve, but clicking that button actually takes you to a screen where you review everything and then hit request to book. So, I can't think of a better term than reserve, but it was just a little confusing for me as I was going through of like, oh, like if I click this, am I going to go ahead and reserve it? Oh no, like there's a bunch of more information to fill out, and then you request. So just making sure, very similar to microcopy, what's going to happen when I do this action? Can I undo it? Like, is this a good choice for me to do? Making those decisions as easy as possible for the user. Third thing, so empower control. So this is one thing that actually my dad called me about, very frustrated one day because he had he got a notification that all of his passwords had been leaked. He had 30 compromised passwords, la-di-da. So he was having a very stressful day trying to go through all of his different accounts and fix all of his passwords. And I had just told him to get a Spotify account. So I was like, you need to be done with your iTunes downloading, just get a Spotify account. So he called me. He's like, I hate Spotify. I don't know how to change my password. It's compromised. What am I supposed to do? And the funny thing here was that, so in the mobile app, you see a gibberish username, your email that you can change, the subscription you have, and hey, to close your account, contact customer support. No password management, no way to manage your subscription. But then when you go to the website on desktop, you have all of these different settings that you can do, right? And one thing that I might have done might have been, oh, I don't see it on the app. Maybe I go check their website. My dad didn't know that. He didn't want to check a different platform. He didn't know the difference. So just making sure that, when users need to take these different actions, they need to delete their account, they need to change their information. Oftentimes there's other things going on that are leading to them changing that information. They're not just one day being like, oh, I should go to this one website that I hardly log into and change this billing information. Like, no, it's a mundane task that's a little bit stressful. Who knows what led to that? So making sure that you're providing it on as many platforms as possible. So meeting the user wherever that they are, super important. Always making sure to provide alternates. So going back to that first story about Alex, where she was incredibly stressed because she knew that she would have to go in early to the doctor's office because there wasn't a 24/7 phone line to call, or there wasn't a, hey, you can print these forms and bring them. There was no alternate other than the online registration. So making sure, here's an example. Government and like registering to vote, like the digital experience isn't great, but at least they have, you can do it online. You can do it by mail, you can do it in person. And then these screenshots from Blue Cross Blue Shield I thought it was nice how, if you needed customer assistance, you could submit this form, just ask a question, or give us a call via all these different mechanisms. I'm definitely someone who would use the form and request an email back because I'm very passive with my communication. Whereas Alex, for example, I'm sure that she would have a little bit of anxiety about, well, when am I going to hear back from the person via email? What if it doesn't go through? What if it goes to spam? And she would definitely just give a call. So making sure that we always have alternates for people, whether it's online, in person, phone, or mail, just thinking through, okay, these important actions that need to be done, what other way could I provide to users to do this if for some reason the first method doesn't work out? Clear settings and instructions. So this is a LinkedIn post where you can see this is going to go to anyone. I'm a pretty frequent LinkedIn user, so I know that this means that it will be visible to anyone. I do wish that they would maybe have something a little bit clearer of, visible to anyone. There is actually a different experience with Alex where she refuses to use Facebook because a few years ago, someone at work came up to her and said, "Hey, how was your trip to Pennsylvania?" And she freaked out. She was like, "How did you know about that? What do you mean?" It was because she didn't know that if you're a friend of a friend, you can see what your friends comment on. And so she was just very taken aback. She was very fearful of who can see my photos. That was not a good experience for her. So she hasn't used it since. So, I think there's been a lot of improvements since then of, who can see your post, making sure that you have clear instructions. Hey, if you choose this setting, this is what's going to happen. And just making that very clear and giving users all the control possible. The last thing I have is just to be human. Some of you might have seen this Slack screenshot circulating around LinkedIn, but I thought it was an awesome example of, someone who they didn't really have any release notes. So they're just like, how's everybody doing out there? Are you getting enough sleep, drinking enough water, eating some vegetables? No big updates. So we just wanted to use this space to be kind to yourself and those around you. Just a totally random, hey, how are you? We're all human here. Just making sure that emails that we send, texts that we send, cookies, notifications, random things like that. Just be a human and speak to someone on a kind and encouraging level. All right. So just to recap everything that we talked about. So inclusivity must consider cognition. So in particular, mental health, but lots of different ways to consider cognitive inclusion. So Alex's anxious thought loops constantly exacerbated by technology. She tells herself, I'm stupid. I have a terrible memory. My marital status makes me a failure. These are all specific to Alex, but a lot of us struggle with some of these different thought loops that, we can be triggered by different things regarding technology. And lastly, just make sure that we avoid self-referential design, and we're always making sure that we consider these anxious and depressive mindsets. Just because you're in a positive mindset and your teams are in a positive mindset, make sure that you think through all of these different ways. So just want to encourage you all to think, as you're designing and developing. So yes, maybe someone in a positive mental state would experience the happy path this way, but how would Alex or someone like Alex, if you have someone else in your life, experience the unhappy path, right? And what can I do to make that better? So that is all that I have for you today. Go ahead and stop screen share. And we can go ahead and open the floor for questions or other discussion.
Thank you, Cara. That was a fantastic presentation.
Thank you.
Well, you're getting lots of love in the chat already. I love it. So go ahead. As people start typing in your questions, there was a few comments that I saw early on that I wanted to mention. Julie said, different generations track passwords in different ways. Trust and technology changes. And I thought that fit some of the experiences you shared.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I personally, like, I use, Google Chrome password manager for everything, but, looking at Alex, like, she's writing everything down, like, what happens, 10 years from now, is that still going to be the same thing? I mean, I think that password user experience in general is something that is difficult for everybody.
And then Heather said, it feels like the technical errors are an opportunity for creativity and tiny moments of delight for the user, especially when there's little they can do on their end.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that, if you just look at like Dribble 404 pages, a lot of people have gotten creative with, if we get a 404, like what illustrations, what GIFs, what fun copy can we include? And I love to see stuff like that included in just general API errors. I was actually, my boyfriend yesterday was getting so frustrated at Ticketmaster because he kept seeing like error, error, error. Like he had no idea what the error was. He's like, oh, what's happening? So anything we could do to be like, hey, bring a little bit of fun into it, make sure to blame the system, include some fun. But absolutely, I think that there are definitely better ways to handle that experience.
Absolutely. Let's see. Alan W has a little check mark on his video. I'm going to click on it. I don't know what it means. All right, Alan, let me know in the chat if that means you have a question. Let's see. Benjamin asked if anyone knew of a firm that is working on design and or research specifically for helping with mental health. I don't know, Cara, if you know anyone, or if anyone wants to chime in the chat as well.
Let's see, I can't think of anything off the top of my head. I'm trying to think. There is I don't know if they're an agency, they're called MadPow. It's dealing with like behavioral health, like different research and just how people behave. I don't know if they specifically dive into mental health, but they gave a presentation at a conference I went to pre-COVID. That was really great. Here, let me put that in the chat just in case it is of interest.
Thank you, Alan, for confirming. Let's see. Chrissy asked, have you had any ways to discuss copy and human verbiage with devs? I'd love to be able to speak their language more.
So I do this a lot. And I think that my method is usually, they tell me what the error is and what the scenario is, and we kind of workshop it together. We're like, oh, okay, so we need to make sure that we're explaining what happens and we tell them what to do. Okay, so how can we explain this in human speak? You can tell me with error codes, you can say which API is breaking. Okay, but what can we actually tell the user? If it's a bunch of technical jargon, we're just going to say, hey, it's technical. But if it's a specific validation requirement that they're not meeting, we need to make sure that we're explaining that and providing next steps. So I usually document that in whether it's in the designs or working with putting it somewhere wherever you document requirements. I think it really just depends on all the different processes. But we usually have, when we are looking at a new feature, we have sort of an error session where we're like, all right, what could go wrong? Cool. Does Cara have a design for that? Nope. Okay, let me make sure that we have a design for that and then go ahead and implement it. So I think just workshopping it together is really the way that I've found that it works best.
Thank you. Christine, sorry, go ahead.
Hey, thanks. I put this in the chat earlier, but it probably got buried because there's so much amazing activity in the chat right now. I just was thinking, of how we kind of are compelled to obviously measure and track everything, metrics and, trying to, I think being able to provide evidence of our design decisions is helpful in getting buy-in. I wonder, have you given thought to how we could measure our empathy in this area, or just how we're doing if we do, make these design decisions, rather when we do make these
Yeah.
decisions.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I hadn't thought about it much, but I think it's a very great point to bring up of, if we're spending some extra time making sure that we're nailing down some of these flows, how do we see, like, was it successful? Was it not? Off the top of my head, the first thing I could consider doing is, specifically with the errors, since that's such a big topic, but, tracking how many people actually went down this unhappy path, this error that we made really user friendly, really simple. How many people are actually seeing that error? Hopefully it's not that many, but if it's 15 people a week who are getting that error, great, we made 15 people's days better, or if it's depending on what your feedback strategy is, if you're able to figure out how to tie, if you have like a satisfaction score or NPS score, and saying like, oh, well, out of the users who experience this version versus this version, you can kind of see how that would change. Or even if you have like an open feedback area, being able to like look at different sentiments and seeing what people are commenting on, reaching out about. I think there are a lot of different ways that you could try. Unfortunately, with some of these, qualitative, initiatives that we have, they're not super easy to track, but those are just some of the things off the top of my head. If anyone else has ideas about, measuring success in this area, I would definitely love to hear.
I think, I'm not sure if I'm saying this right, Sinley. I just added a comment around, we tend to over-index, well, we like to measure business ROI on business results, but we don't measure our empathy and feeling stuff as well. So that's just,
yes, I would encourage you all as it relates to ROI. Jared Spool has done a lot of awesome workshops and articles just about the ROI of UX and measuring UX success. If you're not already following him, you definitely should, but he does these really awesome Monday afternoon talks that are really centered around measuring UX success, UX metrics, being able to quantify that to your business stakeholders. He has some really awesome content.
yeah. I think I hate the NPS score question that you always get interrupted with. How likely are you to recommend this? It'd be nice if we could say like, I don't know, how are you feeling right now or something?
Yeah, absolutely. NPS is something that we're working through together right now as well. Like we actually had a comment the other day. Well, they're like, well, I would never talk to my friends about my prescriptions. So no, I'm not going to recommend this. It's just like not a topic for their friends and colleagues. So it's just interesting, the way that that's worded, what are we actually looking to understand? If it is not necessarily user satisfaction, but, user emotion and like sentiment at that time, at the survey of like, hey, how are you feeling after completing this, happy face, sad face, sour face, I don't know. I mean, something like that could be very interesting to look at about just like, hey, how are you feeling right now?
Absolutely. I just dropped some of Jared's information in chat as well.
Nice. Yeah, he has some great stuff.
Let's see.
I'm just kind of scrolling through the chat. You guys are all so great. Thank you for all the nice words.
If anyone would prefer to speak a question, feel free to.
Okay, I just unmuted myself because I was like, oh, I don't know where to put that check mark thing.
Sorry, Gwen. Please go ahead.
No, I didn't know where the check mark is. I'm like going, I just unmuted myself because of lack of my knowledge on this. But when we were talking about the how are you and putting the various faces and so on, I'm just wondering, like, yes, we might put a happy face or a sort of so face and so on, but for people who might be really anxious or depressed, or, you know, like have all the, you know, for lack of a better term, I'm going to say below the line, you know, type of statuses of, you know, I'm feeling like shit right now. To have those faces and then not have anywhere to go from there seems like that could cause some frustration, because it's like, all right, now what do I do? Now I've just told whoever that I feel like crap, and, you know, now what? So that was just my comment
Right.
on that.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point. I mean, I think it just kind of makes me think about, so, you know, if we can predict, you know, any point where, you know, users are struggling, kind of brings me back to, if they have this really terrible error, how can we lift them up a little bit and encourage them, you know, make them smile, you know, whether they're feeling bad because of their own situation and their own individual experience, or it's because of something that we're doing. You know, anything we can do to make a bad day a little bit better, or, you know, make a good day better, rather than being, you know, oh my gosh, I spilled my coffee and then I'm late to work and this day is the absolute worst, and now, oh my gosh, I took this survey from this thing and yes, I'm feeling bad. Like, you know, just anything to stop the exponential effect of just like it just keeps getting worse and worse. Like, any bad experience that we're designing could be on someone's best day, or it could be like the thing that absolutely just makes them say, this is the worst day ever, I'm really struggling. You know, I think just thinking of that impact that we could potentially have unknowingly, you know, what joy, what humor could we bring into the situation, what encouragement to make it just a little bit better.
And Julie has a note about how many company HR orgs during the pandemic asked, how are you feeling, to employees on a weekly basis. I agree we should have an empathy NPS. How are you feeling questions to our customers. At minimum, the customer feels loved a bit to know that X company cares. So at what point have people been asked, how are you, too many times? And, you know, at what point is that just exacerbating the burnout, because you have to think about how you are at that moment again? I think it's interesting when people can find the balance.
Yeah, and with any, you know, survey ideas, you know, user feedback, you know, I think it's also really important to make sure that they're coming in at the right time. You know, earlier when we were talking about, you know, the autism spectrum, you know, ADHD, people getting distracted, that is so true of, you know, all of a sudden you're filling out a form. And it's like, hey, are you going to recommend this to a friend or a colleague? You're like, I am not focused on that right now. Please get out of my face. Like, let me finish my task. I mean, that's frustrating to everyone, let alone if you already struggle to focus or you struggle with vision or comprehension, anything. So I think, you know, no matter what kind of, you know, survey or pop-up, you know, displaying, you know, it's really important to think through that strategy of when are we going to show it, what makes logical sense, so that we're not interrupting at all.
Have there been instances where the impact of anxiety or depression or other mental health challenges have surprised you in how design impacts them, or just any other anecdotes about surprising instances where, you know, you're a very in touch person who's thinking about these things, but sometimes it even catches some of us off guard. Anything that comes to mind? Or anyone else in the chat as well, times that you were surprised by the impact of design in these areas?
Yeah, I mean, for me specifically, I mean, I think I touched on a lot of different ways with Alex specifically, but just, you know, so I think just having a relationship with her, like I have been well aware for the past, you know, couple of years of, oh, like this language that I find super intuitive because I'm in this field, I'm in technology all day, every day, like didn't even think about the fact that that could be confusing and stressful for people to see, you know, with the, you know, things like I'm able to identify glitchy systems bad design. I know when things aren't working. A lot of people don't know that. It's just the awareness of, hey, people can blame themselves very easily, and making sure that we are being very clear about all of these different systems that maybe we're familiar with, but others aren't. I mean, I think just that in general, it's no longer surprising to me, but I think that really, like, you know, as Alex kept calling me with questions, I just kept being like, wow, like I did not realize that you were struggling with this. And, you know, immediately would go to work the next day and be like, we need to change this error. Like people don't know what 404 means, for example, like stuff like that.
I have an example of a surprise, but it's not my example. It's an example that someone shared a couple years back when I was participating in a workshop. They said that they were on hold, and at the beginning of their hold, they were given the opportunity to select the songs that they wanted, almost like their hold station. And that was really just kind of one of those small moments of delight, and it made sitting on hold less upsetting.
Yeah, that's fun. I like that. We've all heard very staticky, bad classical elevator music, or like 90s pop. It's all over the place sometimes. That's great.
Chrissy has a good question. My user demographic has a high level of bigotry. Has anyone worked on figuring out how to make a product feel diverse without offending people who aren't interested in seeing people differently?
That is a very interesting question. I'm interested to know what product you work on. I won't ask you for details, but that's very interesting.
I don't want to jump in vocally, but I can tell you real quick. I work with farmers.
Sure.
I make products for farmers. And I actually have I have a column in my Asana list of feedback, and one of my columns is attitude problems. And I shouldn't call it attitude problems, but only I get to look at it. And a lot of the attitude in the field that I work with is, you know, the white Trump American personality. But we want to expand to be more diverse and let everyone feel inclusive. But it tends to easily offend people who don't want to be inclusive. And so it's a really weird balance that we're trying to figure out. I just didn't know if anyone had any experience with that.
They probably won't admit they do have experience with that, is my guess.
Okay.
I think there's like an opportunity for us to relate to this. So like if you're thinking about your like maybe having a target audience, like a primary target and a secondary target, like you're trying to appeal to a range of people, but you're going after maybe this one audience. How do you strike that balance between meeting their needs first, but not leaving other people behind or alienating other people? And it feels similar to me, the idea that it's like, you don't want to obviously alienate your first audience, being farmers, but at the same time you want to broaden your appeal or expand that audience. And I wonder if there's just some kind of like best practices around like persona. I don't know. I think it feels more charged when you're thinking about kind of the bigotry piece, or like what you described as attitude, which attitude problems, which I totally agree with, by the way. I also agree with having notes columns that only you get to look at and appreciate. But yeah, I feel like it starts to get a little charged when you're looking at it that way. But if you kind of maybe return more to sort of like the best practices around expanding your audience, or that kind of thing, maybe there's just some best practices that you could look to, but through that different lens that could help.
I know like the Appalachian Mountain Club, hiking club, a lot of national parks have been looking at this as well, of how to expand their audience beyond who has traditionally had resources and access. And it was, I know I cited on a presentation a few years ago at a design conference that was the Appalachian Mountain Club presenting on how they were facing a similar issue, that their core members were pressing back every time they shared resources or an article that encouraged inclusion. I haven't checked on them in a while, but they might have some good results. And it was definitely a challenge that they were full ahead trying to work on. There's also some really good like community farmer programs. I was involved in one with Lowell, Massachusetts, and one in Nashua, New Hampshire, that we've always had some challenges with bringing lots of different types of people together with farming as the common denominator. So there might be some opportunities in there. I'd be super interested in connecting with you because I think that sounds like a really fun project personally. But, Julie said, Chrissy, have you considered including using illustrations that portray people of diversity? So maybe the speaking clues in there. Oh, you responded to that, thank you. There was one other question. AJ, do you think this considerations around anxiety need to be brought forward by designers, or should businesses be the ones pushing this forward?
That's an interesting question. You know, from my perspective, I think that if it's something that you're passionate about, which hopefully all of you are since you are here, that just take on the responsibility, you know, be the voice for the people who, you know, aren't submitting feedback and complaining about how, you know, hey, this website made my depression worse. Like no one is really reaching out about that. So we have to be the voice of those people who are really struggling. So I wouldn't necessarily say that it must be designers, but I guess all of the people here today, like, yes, it is our responsibility to talk to our product managers about this and make sure that we're including user stories. We're thinking about this up front, you know, talk to your developers and work with them on the error states and make sure that they understand why you're working with them on this. And it's not just, oh, Cara's in with more feedback on our copy. Like, no, like, you know, make sure that you rally everyone around like, hey, you know, this is something that I really care about. This is why, you know, here's what the impact can be for users using our site. I think going back to that success question that you had, Christine, like, you know, if some people are very data oriented, if we can say, hey, you know, this many % of our users, you know, are, you know, feeling more anxious or more irritated once they go through this flow, like this is something that we need to take a look at. I think, you know, it is our responsibility to just start talking about it, and hopefully, you know, everyone, you know, on the business side, on the engineering side, product, you know, everyone can help push for it as well. I don't know, what does everyone else think? Do you guys have a lot of talks about this in your organizations, or is this something that's a little more taboo, or, you know, what are your experiences?
I've found that usually as designers, we have to be the one pushing progression for human-centered anything. And it tends to be more of a, usually everyone is really on board for it, but you're right, they're very data-driven and they want like data to prove that it's worth saying something in a way that a human would understand. That's a tricky thing to quantify. I have the same challenge. But yeah.
I would comment that I think designers have done a very good job at bringing just what I would call maybe traditional accessibility forward. I think we've been really at the forefront of driving that. So I think this is another dimension, as you have described it, and just another kind of moment for designers to be able to step up and help push the conversation. I know at the company I was at last, it was very grassroots to get accessibility on the map. And eventually it was adopted kind of in a top-down way. So that felt really good. And I think we have a lot of power as designers to push for these types of things. So I know I personally embrace the opportunity to push for it, whether it's sort of like, my job or not, or like, would it be more effective or meaningful if it started at the top? I tend to think that, we kind of should take the opportunities that we have and just run with them.
Hi there. I'm just joining the conversation. All of this has been super informative. Just to kind of make a comment off of what Christine brought up is I work in design systems. So I'm developing like all the components and everything and guidelines and stuff that our designers use. And I 100% agree, like accessibility is incredibly important. And we do really focus more or less on the model that you showed earlier from the Microsoft guidelines, but this is a whole different thing that I'm trying to bring awareness into our system moving forward, because I think it affects so many of us in a different range of age groups. And just hearing all of the input and how we're trying to push forward is very informative from my standpoint moving forward. And I would love to just to hear more thoughts of how you all think that would be something to contribute into a design system, I guess you can say, because when you're developing components, essentially like our designers are taking those components and generating a flow based off of those. But how would, I guess, I'm trying to ask in a not so direct way, because I'm not looking for a direct answer because I know it's very new, but more or less, how would you go amongst implementing that into a design system? So therefore, when our designers do take components or do take templated and patterns and libraries and things like that, how they would be able to incorporate that into their flow while being mindful?
I think that's a great question. And I mean, it's a very interesting, I don't want to say power, but the role that you have of, to the design system. I mean, if you are able to incorporate some of these guidelines, it only sets your team up for success. The first thing that I think of is like microcopy. That's maybe the easiest thing to weave into a design system of, your buttons, like having some guidelines of make sure that it is concise, straightforward, but also clear to the point, making sure that maybe it's just some of that navigation labels, some guidelines. I don't know if you have a different content writer or anything like that you could work with, but that might be a good place to start, or even having I haven't really seen any design systems have actual like full flows, right? But if you're an enterprise application where maybe you have a lot of different areas where you have 5 different logins for different things based on whatever your journey is doing, but having a approved upon, this is a perfect login and registration and password reset flow that we think is intuitive. It makes sense to people of all sorts of abilities, accounts for accessibility. The language is very clear. We've thought through all of these edge cases and scenarios, and like having that as a more of a design pattern, I suppose, that you can replicate. Maybe if there's anything you can identify like that, where there are interactions or patterns that are replicated in addition to the copy, and kind of establishing some guidelines around that.
That's awesome. Thank you so much.
Just a thought. I mean, I'm sure, I don't know if anyone else has other ideas, but that's a very interesting topic. Love to see where we go with that, because I think I've seen a few different websites and articles that are kind of like, hey, here are inclusive design guidelines, but it's really just bullets and copy. So being able to incorporate that into some form of visual pattern or bring it into a design library for designers to leverage, I think would be very interesting.
And this is a much deeper question, I think, than for the last 3 minutes, but Jas has a good one to get everyone thinking. If the UX maturity of the company is still in the early stages or the customer data is limited, where would you begin to identify or capture the visible, invisible disabilities of the customers?
That's a great question. The first thing I jump to is kind of like I do with personas, where if you don't have the time and budget and resources to do a bunch of qualitative research to generate your personas, make some assumptions and validate it over time. It might be the same for some of these things, thinking of what you know about your user base. Well, what are some of the common disabilities? What are some of the common mental health hurdles that people have? Environmental factors, thinking of, your target audience, and then just kind of doing some general research. What are some things that these users are likely struggling with? Maybe you don't get, too into the weeds, but just kind of starting with some assumptions and using some of those like card resources that are out there where you just kind of mix and match, say like, hey, what about this, person? We're not going to be able to go through a checklist of every single possible identity, disability, emotional, mental impact. That would be a very, very long checklist. I think any step that you can do to, kind of get some bullets down, be like, all right, I'm going to make sure that I'm thinking about these types of users whenever I'm designing, anything's a good start. And as you learn, sorry, my alarm went off. And you learn more about your users over time, it'll just get better from there.
Absolutely, great answer, Cara. Thank you so much, everyone. I'm just going to share my screen to show our next upcoming session. Thank you again, Cara, for your expertise and your inspiration to help us be better designers and better people, I think. Round of applause for Cara. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for all your fantastic questions and comments and for sharing your experiences. I think a lot of us will remember the things that you all shared tonight as we move forward, and this will help us be better designers. In September, we have Thursday, September 23rd, Susan Rice from Workiva will be talking about building the plane while flying, scaling UX within high growth organizations. And then Tuesday, October 26th, Susan Mercer from TripAdvisor will be discussing writing effective research reports. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I can see all your beautiful faces again. Cara, a couple people are asking if you have Twitter information or other ways to get in touch with you.
I am not an active Twitter user. Let me pull up my LinkedIn and please feel free to connect with me. If you do, maybe send me a message and just be like, hey, let's do your talk, because sometimes I don't know who people are. But let me pull a profile. One day, maybe I will have an active Twitter account. For now, it's just my tweets from like 2012. If you do want to stalk me and see what I said back then. But there's my LinkedIn. Definitely happy to connect with a lot of you.
Great. I think there's going to be a lot of busy LinkedIn connections over the next few days. I'm really excited.
Yes, looking forward to more conversations.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, everyone. And I've copied the chat, and I'll try to remember. Mine is memory. That's what I always struggle with. So check that when you're designing for people. Remembering to share the chat transcript in the Slack so that everyone can go back and find the information. Kyle, go ahead.
Oh, no, that was it. Yeah, thank you.
Yes, thank you, Cara. And thanks everybody for joining us from all over the place. It's really exciting to see so many people from so many places. Come back again.
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone.
Copy the chat fast enough. You guys are fast. All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a great evening or morning.
Awesome. Bye, everybody. Great to meet you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.